Well, a ceasefire in Lebanon supposedly came into effect on Friday afternoon, but Lebanese state media now say 5 people were killed in Israeli strikes on the south of the country overnight. That follows authorities on Friday saying a drone strike in the south killed 2. And in the very first hour of the ceasefire, Reuters reported a dozen Israeli strikes, citing Lebanese sources.
In Nabatea, the buzzing of drones echoes through columns of smoke. While US officials announced a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel on Friday, Lebanese authorities blamed the Israeli military of carrying out a series of strikes in the hour after it was supposed to come into force. Before the latest violence, Lebanese civilians had begun fleeing north once again.
Where is the public opinion? Where are those countries to see how we, the vulnerable, are living? Life is very bitter. Find us a solution.
Others, though, were determined to stay, picking through the ruins of their lives and hoping for calm to prevail.
We fled to Akkar during the war and came back after a previous ceasefire began, only to find the village devastated. We can only hope this is the last war.
Overnight from Thursday to Friday, clashes left 4 Israeli soldiers and 18 Hezbollah fighters dead as Israel stood firm.
We will not wait for the next attack to reach our homes. We will continue to remove immediate threats, respond to Hezbollah's violations, and do whatever is necessary to protect our civilians. Our mission remains the same: to ensure that Hezbollah cannot rebuild itself and pose a threat to our civilians.
That's only likely to further hinder solutions on the political front. Negotiations between Israel and Lebanon were meant to begin in Washington next week, and a deal between Iran and the United States, one which stipulates for an end to hostilities in southern Lebanon and to which Israel wasn't a party, looks increasingly shaky.
Let's connect to Jerusalem now, where Noga Tarnopolski is standing by. Hi, Noga. So what have you heard from Israel? Have we got anything from the Israeli side yet on these strikes today or not?
We haven't gotten a thing, and I should say it's a bit unusual. Normally, we hear at the very least from the Israeli army that they were attacking Hezbollah infrastructure or that there was an attempt to eliminate a certain terrorist. This time, we are all reliant on Lebanese state media to inform us what's going on because we have not heard a thing.
And meanwhile, of course, we've got these talks that look like they are still taking place in Switzerland between the US and Iran. The two signed a memorandum, just to remind viewers, earlier this week to stop the war. Implementation is still being ironed out. So we've seen Steve Witkoff flying out to join President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in Switzerland. Then set to meet with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who's meant to be flying out this Saturday. Noga, are these talks now under threat yet again?
It doesn't seem to be the case for now. But, it was worth noting that Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and Steve Witkoff, who is his personal envoy, are men whose only experience in international negotiations started when Donald Trump returned to the presidency in his second term. I think Jared Kushner may have had a little bit of experience making deals in the Middle East during his father-in-law's first term. And so there is quite a bit of concern I'm hearing both in Washington and here in Jerusalem that these relatively inexperienced international negotiators could be taken for a whirl by the much more shrewd and thus far much more successful Iranian negotiators if they do make it all to this meeting in Switzerland. In addition, just to the fact that Araghchi really is the foreign minister of Iran and has quite a bit more authority in that capacity. But beyond that, I don't think we know, and we have not yet seen an agenda for these talks, so we don't know fully what will be on the table.
And you mentioned earlier to me that we're expecting as well there to be talks between Lebanon and Israel, are there not, in Washington soon?
Yeah, this is actually quite interesting because the United States began sponsoring direct talks between Israel and Lebanon some months ago now. And this was quite a big deal because Israel and Lebanon, in their 80-year or so history, have never had diplomatic ties, have always been in a state of war. And this is really a historic rapprochement being sponsored by the White House. So the fact that the United States, in the separate negotiations with Iran, accepted Iran's proposal basically to put itself as the protecting nation of Lebanon, to view Lebanon almost as an Iranian interest rather than a sovereign state, really did seem to undermine the very nature of those talks through which the Lebanese state is attempting to assert its own sovereignty over its nation and try and get the Israeli army out through assurances about disarming Hezbollah, the Iranian-sponsored militia. And so there were quite a few fears that these talks might now be scuttled, but it seems actually that on both sides, both Lebanon and Israel, that were kept on the sidelines of the Iran-US talks, that there actually is a kind of energy now to try and resolve those talks as quickly as possible and reassert their own interests outside of the US-Iran discussion line.
All right, Noga, thank you so much for joining us from Jerusalem, and we can go straight to Beirut, Lebanon, where Renée Davis is standing by. She's our correspondent there. Renée, what are we hearing from the Lebanese side on these strikes?
Authorities have strongly condemned these Israeli strikes, breaching the ceasefire that we had a surprise ceasefire come into effect at 4 p.m. yesterday. Strikes continued beyond that, killing over 50 people, mainly women and children. People that had just come back to Lebanon, that just come back to southern Lebanon specifically, to see if their homes were still there, to see if there were belongings that they could still salvage, and yet they were still hit nonetheless. Hezbollah continues to say that they will continue to fight Israel as long as it's on their territories, and Israel says that they want to remain in all of their positions. So once again, it seems that there's a deadlock sort of in this ceasefire, and it's the Lebanese civilians that are paying the price.
And Renée, typically, it's Hezbollah. Just remind us, because they did say yesterday, or at least they briefed to reporters, that they had agreed to this truce. But much more of these attacks, and it's hard to see how they won't respond.
Well, that's just it, but that goes for both sides as well. Israel also said that they would cease attacks after 4 p.m. and then they continued. Hezbollah the same. I was speaking to a citizen from southern Lebanon the other day who was returning home, and she said to me, it's the same bad joke. We're told there's a ceasefire, then one party launches a rocket or shoots some artillery, the other responds, and it goes on and on and on. And what it looks like now, it looks very much like we're entering the same ceasefire situation that we did after the November 2024 ceasefire, where for more than a year afterwards, there were near daily Israeli attacks on the border. And upwards of southern Lebanon, but Hezbollah did not respond during that time. They only responded on the 2nd of March after opening a support for the killing of the supreme leader in Iran, Ali Larijani. So we'll have to see when these attacks cease and follow these developments.
All right, Renée Davis, thank you so much for joining us from Beirut. That was Renée Davis, and a bit earlier, Noga Tarnopolski there on the program. Great to have their clarity in what is a very confusing situation still in the Middle East.